What's up folks, how's it going? This is Waj. Hope you guys are all doing well. So if you may or may not know, I'm a huge fan of mini retro gaming consoles. Over the years, I've gathered quite a few of them, have a small, decent sized collection. But in this video, we're going to be talking about two of my absolute favorite handheld slash mobile retro gaming solutions that are out there right now, specifically the Retro Flag GPI case coupled with the Pi Zero W and the RG350. Now, before we talk about what makes these two mobile devices fairly special, considering there are a decent number of other retro mobile emulators out there. And before we get into that, I'm just going to briefly talk about Skillshare, our sponsor for this video that made this whole thing possible in the first place. Now, as we move into a new decade with the year 2020, I want to give you guys an opportunity to develop new skills or to deepen existing passions. Skillshare is an online learning community designed for real life. You can learn and grow with short, effective classes designed around your busy schedule. Now, there's a great number and variety of different classes available, from creative endeavors with classes in music, fine art, animation, to expanding your total earning potential with the help of classes in marketing and entrepreneurship. I personally have been really enjoying the classes in UI and graphic design in order to expand my skills in Adobe Illustrator. Furthermore, there's an awesome list of recommended and staff picks that Skillshare offers if you're unsure of where to begin. And with an annual subscription cost of less than $10 a month, it's certainly the more affordable solution to expand your horizons and skill level, especially compared to an in-person workshop or class. Lastly, if you click on the link in the description, you'll get 2 months free premium membership to try out the service. I would definitely recommend everybody to at least do that. I want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video and making this content possible. Now, coming back to the topic at hand, let's first talk about this thing over here. Now, as you can see, it's pretty much an exact replica of the original Game Boy design that came out kind of in the early 90s, late 80s. And this is from Retro Flag. They kind of specialize in making really high quality Raspberry Pi cases that look exactly like the classic gaming consoles. We've covered a lot of their cases on the channel before. And this is specifically the GPI case that came out mid-2019 and it's based around the Pi Zero W model. It's the smallest Raspberry Pi that you can get. We've done a number of videos with this small Raspberry Pi, stuffing it inside a miniature PS1 case. Now, probably the coolest thing about this case is the fact that the Pi Zero W, being so small, actually gets installed inside the game cartridge itself, which is a standalone unit that you can take in and out. There's a 40-pin connector that transfers some of the data, display connections. There's also a USB connection that you need to make, but you get still access to the SD card on the side, and it's a really neat design aspect that they came out with and very sleekly integrated. Now, everything about the case itself is pretty much exact one-to-one replica of the original Game Boy, including the display, which is 2.8 inches across, has a resolution of 320 by 240, but it is an IPS display, so the viewing angles are fantastic. It has the same dimensionality and weight of the original Game Boys, and at the back of the device you can see that it's even powered by 3 AA batteries, which is really cool. There's also a switch on the top of the device, so you can turn on and off the unit. With that switch, you do need to run a safe shutdown script for the Raspberry Pi, but that's super easy to do. Furthermore, since we're using the Raspberry Pi platform, it's probably best to run RetroPie, which is probably the most popular emulation platform for the Raspberry Pi, and it's super simple to install. You can pretty much get this thing set up within half an hour or so and load up your favorite ROMs. I'm using a skin that replicates the Game Boy Advance theme called a GBZ35. It's better optimized for this smaller display. And in terms of what games you can emulate on this thing, it's pretty much limited by the power of the Raspberry Pi Zero W. So that means games from the Atari 2600 era NES, SNES, Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis all run pretty much fine on the specific platform. The cool thing is at the back there's also some bumpers or shoulder buttons called the L and R buttons, so you can play some of those SNES games if you map those buttons accordingly. And in terms of the actual button feel for the main controls, the X, Y, and the D-pad, start, select, they feel exactly the same as the original Nintendo Game Boy, which is really amazing, and it's definitely going to bring a lot of good memories for people that played the original Game Boy when they were a kid. Other things to note is you do also have a 3.5mm headphone jack, volume dial, and a pretty decent speaker as well. Now moving forward, let's talk about the more powerful / more quote-unquote serious retro handheld gaming console, and that is the RG350, also known as the Retro Game 350. There's a lot of manufacturers that make this device. This specific one is from Anbernic, and it has a 3.5-inch IPS display with a resolution of 320 by 240. We have a JZ4770 CPU, which is a single core processor clocked in at 1 gigahertz. We have 512 megabytes of DDR2 memory, as well as 16 gigabytes of internal storage, since there is an internal SD card, in addition to the built-in external SD card slot that's located at the bottom of the device. And we also have a built-in 2500 milliamp hour battery. The button layout is fairly similar to the Nintendo Switch Lite, so we have full-size dual analog thumbsticks, asymmetrical in order. We have a D-pad as well as A, B, X, Y buttons, start, select, as well as 2 sets of bumpers or shoulder buttons located on the top portion of the device. There's also built-in rumble capacity, and there's a decent amount of connectivity options at the top. You have 2 USB-C connections, a 3.5mm headphone or AV output connection, as well as something that I wish the new Nintendo Switch Lite had, which is a mini HDMI connection if you want to output the display to a larger monitor or TV. Now, the firmware that runs on this thing is very customizable. It's fairly versatile in terms of the amount of emulators that are already available, and there's a thriving community behind this device that's expanding the capabilities of this thing on a fairly frequent basis. Right now, you can emulate all of the classic gaming titles that you would find in the 70s, 80s, all the way to the mid-90s, and this is an excellent platform for emulating PlayStation 1 games. In fact, it does a better job of running those games than the classic PlayStation console that we took a look at a while back, and for the most part the experience was very fluid, well around 60 frames per second on most of the titles that I experienced, whether that was Tekken 3, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, and even the Gran Turismo 2 series. Now, beyond just a PlayStation 1, you can also play some early 90s PC games such as Doom, as well as Quake 1 and 2, and most of those games run pretty flawlessly, although they don't really work with the analog thumbsticks all too well, but they are playable nonetheless. Furthermore, there's also an N64 emulator that's in the alpha stages right now. Most of the games that I've tested run pretty terribly. The render output is very poor, sluggish frame rates, choppy audio, and really not a good playable experience. But if they can optimize the emulator a little bit further, perhaps we can get a little bit better of an experience. But right now, N64 emulation is possible, but definitely not enjoyable on the RG350. But when it comes to emulating games, PlayStation 1 and older, definitely not a problem here. And I definitely think that this is the more versatile, a little bit more pocket-friendly mobile gaming experience that's available out there. And I would even put it slightly above the capabilities of the GPI case, which is again limited by the Raspberry Pi Zero architecture, which is not going to be too powerful. You're definitely not going to play PlayStation 1 games on there, and you don't have analog thumbsticks for that anyways. So this is definitely the more versatile experience, and probably going to give you a little bit of value, because you can pick these up for around $80 to $90 versus the GPI case from Retro Flag is $69. Then you need to get an SD card, batteries, as well as the Pi Zero W as well. So you're probably going to look at around $100 if you want to go for a bundle or something like that. Check out the description down below if you do want links to any of these products, and if you go through any of those links, it does help support the channel, and we definitely appreciate all your guys' support. But I definitely want to know what you guys think is the best handheld gaming console for the retro emulating platforms that are available right now. Obviously, we have the new Nintendo Switch, we have the Nintendo Switch itself, and there is some emulating potential obviously in them, but they're pretty locked down devices versus these are fairly open source, and hopefully they're going to get better as we go into 2020 with even better hardware and even better emulating platforms, because definitely a big fan of this space, especially for kind of replicating the late 90s, early 2000 gaming world. I think is going to be really cool in the mobile space. So hopefully we're going to get some new hardware coming out, and we'll be looking out for consoles that can do that. So we're talking about early Xbox, PlayStation 2, as well as N64 and all that stuff, and Dreamcast, of course. But besides that, guys, that's really it. I definitely want to give you guys a huge shout out for making all this stuff possible, for supporting the channel, and a big shout out to Skillshare for, again, supporting us as well. Check out the description down below for more details about everything we talked about, and we'll see you real soon. Take care.